Welcome to the Untold Tales audio anthologies. Written by Dr. Jeffrey A. Robinson and Don't Muchow, and narrated by Melissa Del Toro Schaffner. The Traveling Salesman. I first met Glactal while driving down Highway 146, about 30 miles northwest of Houston. I was headed into the city, to interview for a construction job. While I had prepared a list of about a dozen potential jobs from local classifieds, they were all in Houston. Unfortunately, despite searching for the past 4 weeks, I hadn't been able to find anyone who'd consider hiring me. I wasn't confident looking in the big city was going to help that much. My last job had been working for a small company that managed more than a dozen food trucks near a small town called Stilson. But with the pandemic and the resultant recession, business had dropped off and they'd let me go. So I'd been job hunting ever since. My best prospects all seemed to draw me toward the city, so I was headed there to follow up on some leads. Anyway, as I was driving the nearly empty road early on a Tuesday morning, I got stopped by a stranger who was standing in the middle of the road. Just standing there, with his hand in the air, as if to flag me down. I slowed down cautiously to examine the guy. He was dressed in casual clothes, nothing fancy, but nothing to indicate that he was homeless or a transient or anything like that. He appeared to be in his late 50s and looked harmless enough, so I pulled over to the side of the road and stopped. I figured that he might need help or that his car had broken down nearby, since we were too far from anywhere that he could have easily walked. Without hesitation, he strolled over to the side of my car, and before I could say anything, he simply opened the passenger door and climbed into the seat next to me. I immediately shouted, "What the fuck?" As he sat back, he turned and calmly said, "Your name is Bob Clayton, and I need to speak with you." "Get out of my effing truck!" I screamed at him. "Please calm down. I only..." Terrified that this was the beginning of a carjacking or something worse, I yelled, "Get out of my truck now!" And then I lunged for the handgun that I always kept under my seat. Just for self-defense, of course. After all, this is Texas. You never know when you're going to meet someone crazier than yourself. However, before I could reach it, I found myself paralyzed, unable to move. As my torso slumped against the driver's side door, I managed to turn my head toward my unusual passenger, my eyes growing wide with terror. However, he didn't seem threatening at all. With his head tilted to one side, as if studying me, he simply held what looked like a car key fob in his hand, which he pointed at me. "This is a neural modulator," he said softly. "It is set on low intensity and it is preventing you from using any of your major muscles. You can look at me and breathe and even talk, but your arms and legs will simply seem too weak to move until I turn this device off. Do you understand?" I nodded silently. My terror was such that I could not speak. Hell, I couldn't even blink. "Bob, I have evaluated many potential candidates, and I have selected you to talk to." I realized that my jaw was open, and that I must look like an idiot. I closed my mouth quickly and just nodded. "In any case," the stranger continued, "I want to make you a business deal. A very lucrative deal." Again, I didn't say anything, though I might have finally blinked. "Do you understand what I just said?" he asked. After a long silence, he added, "You can speak, you know." "Yeah, I get it," I replied. Then I finally regrouped mentally and demanded, "Who the hell are you?" Introductions, of course, I forgot. "My name is Glactal Lorda Barastlan, and I am an extraterrestrial visiting your planet." I stammered. Glactal... "No, that's fine," he said, interrupting me. "Just call me Glactal. My full name is obviously too difficult for you to pronounce." "And you're an alien?" "Yes." "And you've come specifically to talk to me?" "Precisely." I closed my eyes, wondering if I was having hallucinations or something. Maybe I had had a stroke or had been in an accident, and this was all some dream I was having as I was dying. "No," said Glactal. You are perfectly all right. You have not suffered a traumatic brain injury. There's just the two of us in the cab of your truck, having a little conversation." I opened my eyes and looked at him sideways. I hadn't said anything out loud. That meant... "Yes," he said, smiling at me. "I can read your mind. That's thanks to another little gadget that I have." "Uh-huh," I grunted. I suddenly didn't know what to say, and then realized that he could hear everything I was thinking. "Isn't that right?" I thought at him. "Yes, exactly," he replied. After a long moment, he lowered the key fob and asked, "Do you think we can dispense with this? You would be more comfortable if you could move." Realizing that I had a little choice, I said, "Sure." Then, I suddenly found that I could move once more. "What are you?" I stammered. As I started to explain, I am an alien, a visitor from another world. "And what are you doing here?" I muttered. "Well, for all intents and purposes, I am what you would call a traveling salesman." What?" "You know, someone who goes door to door completely unsolicited and sells trinkets and products to homeowners. You know, like a Fuller brush salesman." What?" Pulling out a small device like a calculator or a cell phone, he touched its surface and said, "Oh, sorry, wrong lexicon. You must realize that it's been more than a century since I last visited. Let's see, more current reference. How about an Avon lady or a Girl Scout selling cookies?" Stop, I said. "I get the reference. You're a salesman." "Yes." Gesturing around him, he added, "It's not the most glorious of regions, and I'll probably never get rich. But these backwater worlds on the rim of the galaxy often hide surprising opportunities if you have the entrepreneurial spirit to ferret them out." "Can I ask how you learned our language?" "What, by watching television, of course." Great, I thought. I can only imagine what he must think of us. "Oh, don't worry," he replied. "I know that most of the stuff you transmit is garbage, but salesmen like myself have to learn the local language in order to do any business." "So you're gonna sell stuff here?" "Right." "To us, Earthlings?" "Exactly. You understand perfectly." "And you want me to buy something?" Glactal laughed, saying, "Oh, no. That's not why I need you." "Then what do you want from me?" I asked. "You said you specifically wanted to talk to me." "Yes. I want to hire you." "Me, Bob Clayton. Why?" "Well, as you might imagine, I would have a little difficulty selling directly to customers on this planet. While this wonderful mask hides my true features, I have difficulty fitting in, socially. My mannerisms and speech make me stand out." "Yeah," I thought, remembering how I had wanted to shoot him within 3 seconds of meeting him. "Ah, you see my point," he said. "And that's why I want to hire you, to serve as a middleman between me and my prospective customers." "So you want me to sell things to other people for you?" "You might say that, but there are actually many other important things that I'd like you to do." I squinted at him, wondering what he meant. "Like what?" I asked. "Well, like opening up bank accounts, delivering messages, arranging meetings, acting as my agent in business transactions." "Then you just want me to be your errand boy?" "Oh, no," said Glactal. "I am hoping for far more than that. I want you to be my partner here on Earth." "Your partner?" This didn't make any sense at all. "Why me?" "Well, I've been here for 3 months, studying the changes in your society since I last visited. By the way, I must say, you've all made fabulous progress in recent decades. Anyway, I've been looking for someone to work with, and I've reviewed more than 3,000 potential applicants in this geographic area, and you are by far the most acceptable candidate that I've found so far." "Me? What makes me so special?" "Several things. First, you are single. and unemployed. Yeah, he thought. I lost my job and my girl in the same month. Makes it sound like a good thing. Also, you are moderately well educated and studied general science in college for 3 semesters. Yeah, keep rubbing it in, I thought. The government canceled my scholarship program, and the university jacked up their rates. Then the pandemic hit, and everything went into lockdown. But most importantly, you have a flexible and questioning mind. You are also relatively free of the more common prejudices and biases, and you handle stress well. I handle stress well? I asked, in disbelief. Yes, he said. Consider how well we are conversing right now. Many individuals of your species would be screaming and running down the highway right now. I shook my head and immediately regretted all the science fiction books and comics I had read over the years, and all the weird movies that I'd watched. That was also a trait that I found promising, said Glactal. And you want me to be a partner? Yes. I thought for a moment and then fired off some questions. Wait, if you're hiring me, that means I'll be paid, right? Yes, of course. Like, how? Do you have money? After a fashion. For the time being, I thought I might pay you with these. Reaching into a pocket, he pulled out what I thought were small pieces of candy wrapped in metal foil. He handed me 2 of them, and I was surprised at their weight. As I studied them, my eyes grew wide as I realized that I was holding 2 small bars of gold. Yes, that's exactly what they are, said Glactal. Those are 1-ounce bars of pure gold bullion. Each currently sells for about $2,000 on your commodity exchanges. Reaching back into his pocket, he pulled out more and handed them to me until I held about a dozen in my cupped hands. This is more than $25,000, I stammered. That's more money than I've made in the past 10 months. I know, said Glactal, and I have a lot more of that if you're willing to take the job I'm offering. Thinking again, I asked, so how much will you pay me? Well, I was thinking of letting you keep 10% of whatever we make, but for the time being, I could ensure a salary of at least $200,000 per year until our investments start paying off. 200,000, yes, but that's only just to start. I assure you there will be much more later. I was so dumbfounded that I didn't know what to say or do. Finally, I just stuffed the gold bars into my jacket pocket and eventually found the presence of mind to ask, "And what do you want me to do again?" "I want you to be my agent and to act on my behalf to make money for me." "But with all this gold, why do you need me to make money?" "Well, because I can't spend that gold to buy the things I need from here on Earth. I don't have an identity or any ID cards, so I cannot sell the gold and convert it into local currency. I can't open bank accounts, transfer funds, buy or sell things. Also, if I sell too much gold, I would attract attention. On the other hand, if I tried to launder the gold into money, it would likely involve rather unscrupulous criminal organizations, and that would attract a different kind of bad attention. Finally, as you've noted, I would find it difficult to pass myself off as an Earthling. In short, I need a local partner to manage the front end of the business we are going to create so that we can both make a lot of money in a short time. Then he stopped talking and simply looked at me once more, tilting his head to one side in an unspoken query. As I reviewed everything he'd said, I was surprised to find myself remarkably comfortable with Glactal's outlandish explanations. With the prospect of getting filthy rich, I was seriously tempted. Grimacing for a second, I asked, "Wait, one more important thing. Will I be required to do anything illegal?" "Well, not technically," said Glactal, "though you may have to tell some white lies about who you work for and where you get the things you will be selling." My eyes narrowed, and I thought for a moment. "So, what will you be selling here, on Earth?" "Oh, trinkets and baubles, things of little consequence. Nothing dangerous, of course. The trade union I belong to has very strict rules, and I could lose my license if I dealt in contraband or prescribed items. We'll start with something simple, and as time goes on, we'll establish a base of operations and expand. Okay, you have a deal. So what are we going to do first? Well, first I have some forms for you to sign. Actually, I don't need a signature. I only need a sample of your DNA, blood, or spit at the bottom of these forms will do. The first is a rather strict non-disclosure agreement. The next document outlines our partnership and details of our profit-sharing arrangement. Then, after you've signed those, I'll need you to buy a suit, open a few bank accounts in your name, locally and overseas. Then, you'll rent some offices and purchase some properties in the warehouse district. But first, let me explain our first venture. A security detail escorted me into the main boardroom of the TXC Energy Corporation at the top of the Wilson Tower in Houston. Carrying only a single leather-bound folder, I felt I looked quite distinguished in my perfectly cut Italian suit. Walking to the end of the table and without waiting for a welcome, I simply began speaking. Gentlemen, I would normally apologize for demanding a meeting like this on such short notice, but frankly, I'm done with this. Frank Burgess, the chairman of the board, looked shocked and started saying something, but I cut him off. Look, I said, I'm tired of your excuses. I have supplied more than 5,000 samples of our Plaxon device to you, and you've had more than 5 months to evaluate the product. I have provided technical descriptions of how our device changes the viscosity of nearby fluids and how it could benefit your company. The Trans-Canadian pipeline that you only completed last year currently delivers 1.1 million barrels a day from oil extraction facilities in Canada to refineries on the Gulf Coast. Unfortunately, after the project was scaled back and rerouted past Indian reservations and ecologically sensitive wildlife areas due to environmental concerns, and consists of one pipe instead of the 4 that were originally planned. Reaching into my pocket, I pulled out a small black object that looked like half of a black ping-pong ball. Tossing it onto the conference tables, it rolled briefly and then rattled to a stop at the top of the fine wood surface. This device generates a field that decreases the viscosity of your oil and virtually negates the friction of fluids being pumped. It would more than quadruple the flow of oil through that single pipe without having to heat the oil to more than 40 degrees centigrade the way it is now. This would increase the capacity of that single oil line from 1.1 to nearly 5 million barrels a day. That's an increase of more than $75 billion a year. And all we are asking is a mere $100 million for the lease of our technology. Burgess cleared his voice and said, Surely, Mr. Clayton, you understand that we... No, I shouted, interrupting the chairman. I don't understand. And frankly, I'm out of patience. I know that your engineering teams have confirmed that the product works as described. I also know that you have no problems with the contractual agreements that we submitted, or you would have suggested changes to them. I am also confident that you are simply stalling for time, hoping that you will be able to reverse engineer these samples so you can simply use the technology yourself, since the inventor who created these devices decided not to patent his discovery. Throwing the leather portfolio onto the table in front of the chairman, I added, Here are the contracts that I've already signed, specifying the sale of 800,000 of the Plaxon devices, which can be affixed along the entire length of your 1,000-mile pipeline. It also specifies the delivery of those devices in 5 shipments at a cost of $20 million each. Now, you can sit there and make whatever excuses you want, but I'm not sticking around to hear them. If you want our business, you can sign those contracts. If you don't, I'll make identical offers by the end of the week to Pemex in Mexico, Aramco in Saudi Arabia, and Gazprom in Russia. I'm sure at least one of those companies, if not all 3, would jump at the opportunity you've decided to pass on. In any case, I'm going down to my limousine and I'll wait 5 minutes for those fully executed contracts to be delivered to me, or I'll be taking my business elsewhere. And with that, I turned on my heel and headed toward the boardroom door. I was terrified. I was sure I'd overplayed my role as a super confident, high-stakes dealmaker, and that I'd just blown the deal. But as I reached the threshold of the room, Burgess called out, and my heart nearly stopped. I stopped and slowly turned back to face him. 5 minutes later, I sat in my limo, holding my copies of the final contracts with TXE Energy. As I smiled proudly to myself, Glaxel spoke to me through the tiny communication device in my ear. "Well done," said Glaxel. "That worked out perfectly. You put on quite the show." "Thanks," I replied. "I particularly liked the part where you threatened to walk out of the meeting. That was very well done." "Yeah," I said. "For a second, I thought I'd overdone it and ruined everything. But it did work out, didn't it? I'd never pulled a stunt like that, and found the experience to be quite exhilarating." "So," I said, changing the subject, "we're off to meet with the military then?" "Sadly, no," said Glaxel. "They've called off the meeting, again." "But they're just stalling the way TXE was." "Of course they are. That's what most governments do best. But it's not certain we will ever get a contract with them." "But these devices could really benefit them. By attaching these devices to military aircraft, you could virtually eliminate all air friction. Jets that can barely reach the speed of sound could accelerate to Mach 4 or 5, and supersonic jets could fly up to Mach 10. Hey, you've remotely watched their own tests, and you've confirmed those results. This product could revolutionize things for the Air Force." "That's true," said Glaxel, "but they're going to be very reluctant to purchase any technology that they don't fully control. That's why they're dragging their feet. They are certain that they can figure out how our devices work." "But they can't, can they?" I asked, suddenly worried. "No, not a chance. It would be more likely for chimpanzees to figure out how to make computer microchips." "Then what about our offers to the Navy? Weren't they going to put some on submarines to see how fast they could go in water if resistance was eliminated?" "Yes, and in their first test run, they got a specifically designed submarine up to a speed of nearly 300 knots before the props broke off. But they are playing the same game as the Air Force. In fact, I think they're working together." "Well then, can't we just pull the same stunt we just used here?" I asked. "No. If you threaten to sell this tech to the Russians, the Iranians, or the North Koreans, the way you bluffed Burgess, the U.S. government would classify the entire affair and throw you in a deep, dark cell offshore faster than you could blink." "Oh," I said begrudgingly. "So what do we do then?" "Well, we'll have to deal with them differently and prepare an exit strategy." What?" "Never mind. Just head back to the warehouse. I'll handle everything." Several months later, I arrived at our main warehouse in the middle of the night. Responding to an alarm about a break-in, I was surprised to find dozens of armed soldiers inside, loading the last of the crates of Plaxon devices into nearby trucks. I hurried forward to stop them all, but an officer stepped into my path and stopped me. "Wait!" I called, yelling at the guard while trying to get past the stupid officer. "You can't do that!" "Yes, we can," said the officer, holding up a clipboard with some paper attached to it. "But what right? That's private property," I insisted. "We are authorized by the National Technology Security Confiscation Act," said the officer, tearing off the top paper on his clipboard and handing it to Bob. "I've never heard of that," I argued feebly, as I tried to make sense of the paper I now held. "That's because it's a secret executive order that was signed by the president back in 2003. You're not even allowed to know about it." "But those are mine." "Not anymore." "But those won't be of any use to you. You don't even know how they work or how they're made." "And neither do you," retorted the officer. "What?" I mumbled. "I mean, we know about your scam. We know about Dr. Purell and how you acquired these devices." "Dr. who?" "Don't play dumb, Mr. Clayton." "Just go with this, Bob," said Glaxel through my hidden earpiece. "Just play along and act like you don't know what's going on." "But I don't know what's going on," I replied loudly. Thinking that I'd spoken to him, the officer responded. "Sure you do, Mr. Clayton. Dr. Purell is your imaginary partner. He was a retired scientist from Los Alamos who was something of a crackpot. After he left the lab, he lived alone and worked on dozens of wild theories that he couldn't get his former colleagues to listen to. Somehow, he stumbled on something quite revolutionary that he managed to get working. Then he cashed in his life savings and retirement money and even sold his home to manufacture about 1 million of his new devices before he died. He had planned on getting rich selling his technology, but he died in a fire in his own lab before he could execute his marketing plan. No one else ever knew about his project, except his older brother, who was also the executor of his estate. Unfortunately, his brother passed away a year later, and everything that either of them knew about the doc's secret died with them. We've discovered that you just stumbled on this warehouse of products when you bought this abandoned warehouse. God knows how you figured out their unique abilities. In any case, since then you've been running a scheme selling the devices to places like TXE Energy and trying to con the US government into buying them as well. But you lied. You never had a partner, and you don't know how to make these things. You don't even know how they work, and you can't even make any more of them, can you? I didn't know what to say. It was easy to act dumb since I really didn't have a clue what the officer was talking about. The officer laughed at me and glared menacingly. "Don't worry, we're not going to arrest you, at least not right now. We're simply confiscating all of the remaining products that you have here. Don't try anything to stop us. If you go to lawyers or the press about this, you'll be locked up under the National Security Act and likely never heard from again. Just let the matter drop and be thankful you can just walk away from all this." As the soldiers finished emptying the warehouse, I stood helplessly, half in shock and uncertain about what to do. As they drove off and left, I called to Glaxel. "What the hell?" "Sorry," replied my alien friend. "I couldn't warn you in advance. I wanted your shock to be real." "Well, that worked. I nearly pissed myself. But what was all that about a scientist named Puri or Pearl?" "That's Purell, and he really did exist. He was a crazy academic with outlandish theories. After retiring from his job, he tinkered in his lab before it burned down, and he didn't invent anything useful and never imagined creating anything like this." "Then why do the military guys think that he did this stuff and that it involved me?" "Because I planted some evidence in the remains of his lab and created a paper trail leading from his dead brother to this warehouse. It looks like you just stumbled on this stuff and used it as your own to make a quick buck." "But why?" "Well, as I said before, we needed an exit plan. I needed to tie off loose ends, and this was the best way to do that. The government power elite are always more willing to believe conspiracy theories than mundane truths. It was easy to mislead them and get them to believe things that they wanted to hear. And now, things have worked out great." "Huh? How is this a good thing?" "Well, Phase 1 is done. The product is gone, and everyone is satisfied. There's no possibility of a new product, so you won't be bothered anymore. Oh, and you've been placed on a proscribed vendor list with the US government. They can't do business with you, and you can never do business with them again either. We don't have to worry about them meddling with us ever again. The entire matter is classified, and in a couple of months, everyone will have forgotten about you and this incident. Nothing has been adversely affected, so we can move on." "Not affected? What about the military now owning hypersonic jets and super-speed submarines and the fact that TXE will kill their competition? And they took tens of thousands of additional units just now." Glactal made a dismissive sound and said, Well, the Plaxon units only work for 2 years, and the military only has the initial free samples we provided, enough for about 10 fighters and 3 subs. The devices they just took weren't activated or tuned to a specific type of fluid, air, water, or oil, so they're inert. The military only has a few novel prototypes that they'll never be able to reproduce. On the other hand, TXE will have windfall profits for 2 years, but they'll be no more than they would have made if their original pipeline had been approved. In 24 months, it will be as if we had never done business with either of them. Besides, remember what's really important. We now have $100 million in offshore accounts, so we can get ready for the next phase of our product plan." "There's another phase?" I asked incredulously. "Oh yes, I have other commodities to sell, and in the next year, we are going to leverage our money and get a 100-fold return on our investment. By next Christmas, our 100 million will turn into 10 billion. "So, what do you want me to do next?" I asked meekly, feeling quite lost. "Well, it's going to take me a little while to set things up," said Glactal. "But remember, 10% of our earnings are yours. I've moved these monies into your local account, but I'll be holding the rest in reserve. I suggest you take your 10 million and go buy a nice beachfront mansion, a fancy car, or maybe a nice boat. Enjoy yourself and wait for me to contact you about 3 months from now. You've been a great help." I felt dazed and shook my head to clear it, but I still felt like I'd just been on the losing end of a barroom brawl. Turning, I slowly headed back to my car, but I thought of a question for Glactal and called out to him several times. To my surprise, however, there was no reply. He didn't answer me. Standing in the empty parking lot, I thought about the advice Glactal had given me, and finally, I decided what I was going to have to do. First thing in the morning, I was going to look up a good real estate agent. The end. The Traveling Salesman Part 2 will feature Bob and Glactal when they take over one of the largest advertising companies on the East Coast. Thank you for listening. We love our listeners, fans, and patrons here at Untold Tales, and we would love to hear from you. Please consider leaving us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, letting us know what your favorite story has been in our 3 seasons of storytelling so far. We'd love to continue shaping our podcast with stories that you'd like to hear. As always, thank you for listening and have a wonderful day.